Princess Lyra stood in the center of the great hall with her hands folded in front of her. The ceiling above her head stretched so high that clouds sometimes formed inside the room. Thousands of faces looked down at her from the floating platforms. Some of them smiled. Most of them laughed quietly behind their hands. She knew why they were laughing. She had known for her entire life. Her brother Prince stood at the main platform with their father's council behind him. He wore the golden armor of the first son, and his smile was wide and cruel. He raised his hand, and the hall became silent. "Today marks a great moment in our history," said. His voice echoed through the massive space. "The Empire has made contact with a new species. They call themselves humans. They live on a small planet called Earth in a forgotten corner of the galaxy." The crowd made sounds of mild interest. New species were discovered often. Most of them were primitive. Most of them were ignored. "As a sign of our goodwill," continued, "I have decided to send a member of our royal family to live among them, to teach them, to show them the greatness of." Lyra felt her stomach turn cold. She already knew what was coming. "My beloved sister, Princess Lyra, has volunteered for this sacred duty." She had not volunteered. No one had asked her anything, but she kept her face calm and empty the way she had learned to do since childhood. Showing emotion was weakness. Showing pain was worse. The crowd erupted in whispers. Everyone understood what this meant. Lyra was not being sent as a diplomat. She was being thrown away like garbage. Among the children were everything. Their species could only reproduce once every 100 years, and fertility was considered the highest blessing. A who could not have children was considered broken, useless, a mistake. Lyra had been born with a defect in her genes. The doctors had discovered it when she was still a baby. She would never produce an heir. She would never continue the royal bloodline. From that moment on, she had become invisible to her family. Her father, Emperor, had not spoken to her in 40 years. Her 6 older siblings treated her like a servant at best, like a disease at worst. Only her handmaiden lady had ever shown her kindness. And now they were sending her to a primitive planet, alone, to live among creatures they considered little better than animals. It was a joke. The whole empire knew it was a joke. Lyra lifted her chin slightly and looked at her brother. "I accept this honor," she said clearly. Her voice did not shake. Something flickered in his eyes. Disappointment, perhaps. He had wanted her to cry. He had wanted her to beg. But Lyra had stopped crying a long time ago. The ceremony ended quickly after that. No one came to wish her well. No one came to say goodbye. She walked back to her chambers alone, her footsteps echoing in the empty hallways. Lady was waiting for her inside. The older woman's eyes were red from crying. When she saw Lyra, she rushed forward and pulled her into a tight embrace. "This is wrong," whispered. "This is so wrong. How can they do this to you?" Lyra gently patted her friend's back. "They have been doing this to me since I was born. This is simply the final step." "But Earth," said, pulling back to look at her. "It is so far away. The humans are so strange. No one even knows if you can survive there." "Then I will find out." Wiped her eyes. "You are too calm. You are always too calm. Do you not feel anything?" Lyra was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "I feel tired. I have spent my whole life trying to earn a place in a family that does not want me. Perhaps it is time to stop trying." They spent the rest of the day packing. Lyra was not allowed to take much. A few sets of clothes, some basic supplies, a small tablet with information about Earth and its inhabitants. The Empire was not investing resources in this mission. They expected her to fail. They expected her to die quietly and be forgotten. That night while slept, Lyra crept out of her chambers. She walked through the dark hallways of the palace until she reached the medical archives. The guards did not stop her. Why would they? She was nobody. She spent hours searching through the records. She found studies about hundreds of alien species, compatibility tests, biological analyses, but when she searched for humans, she found almost nothing. They had made contact with Earth only 2 years ago. They had observed the humans from a distance, gathered some basic data, and decided they were not interesting enough to study further. There were no medical reports, no genetic analyses, no compatibility tests. Lyra sat back in her chair, thinking. The Empire had declared that, and humans were completely incompatible, that it could never reproduce with a human, but she could not find any evidence that anyone had actually tested this claim. It was just an assumption, a guess based on nothing. She did not know why this mattered to her. She was infertile anyway. No amount of compatibility would change that, but something about it bothered her. Her whole life, people had made assumptions about her. They had decided what she was and what she could not be without ever really looking. Maybe the humans were the same. Maybe everyone had decided they were primitive and useless without ever really understanding them. The next morning, Lyra boarded a small transport ship. It was old and uncomfortable, barely maintained. The kind of ship they gave to people who did not matter. Stood at the dock, crying openly. "I will find a way to visit you," she called out. "I promise." Lyra smiled sadly. They both knew it was a lie. Once she left, no one would spend resources to visit a forgotten princess on a forgotten planet. She looked back at the palace one last time, at the gleaming towers where she had grown up, at the world that had never wanted her. Then she turned away and walked onto the ship. The journey to Earth would take several weeks. Lyra spent most of it alone in her small cabin, reading everything she could find about humans. They were strange creatures. They lived very short lives, sometimes less than 100 years. They fought wars over small pieces of land. They believed in invisible gods. They kept other animals as companions, treating them almost like family members. The more she read, the more confused she became. Nothing about humans made logical sense. They were emotional, irrational, and completely unpredictable. Perhaps that was why the Empire had dismissed them so quickly, valued order and logic above all else. Humans seemed to value nothing consistently at all. On the final night of her journey, Lyra stood at the small window of her cabin and watched Earth grow larger in the distance. It was a blue and green planet, covered in water and clouds. It looked peaceful from space, almost beautiful. She placed her hand against the cold glass. "I do not know what I will find down there," she whispered to herself, "but it cannot be worse than what I am leaving behind." The ship began its descent toward the planet. Somewhere below, her new life was waiting. She did not know yet that it would change everything. Ho sat on his porch and watched the sun set behind the mountains. The sky turned orange and pink, and the rice fields glowed like gold. It was beautiful, but he barely noticed anymore. He had seen this view every evening for 3 years, ever since died. His wife had loved sunsets. She would sit beside him on this same porch, holding his hand, talking about small things, what they would eat for dinner, whether the old dog next door was feeling better, simple conversations about simple days. Now the porch felt too big for one person. The whole house felt too big. Ho was a veterinarian. He ran a small clinic on his property where he treated the animals of the local farmers, cows with stomach problems, chickens that stopped laying eggs, dogs that ate things they should not eat. The work kept him busy, and busy was good. Busy meant he did not have to think. His neighbor, Grandma Bong's son, walked up the path toward his house. She was a tiny woman in her 70s, but she moved with the energy of someone much younger. She carried a covered pot in her hands. "Ho," she called out, "you missed dinner again. I could see your lights were off." He stood up and bowed politely. "I am sorry, Grandma, I was not hungry." "Not hungry," she clicked her tongue in disapproval. "A young man like you needs to eat. Here, I brought soup." She pushed past him into the house before he could refuse. This happened at least twice a week. Grandma Bong's son had decided that Ho was her responsibility, and nothing he said could change her mind. While she set the table, she talked about the usual things: the weather, the price of rice, the unmarried woman who had just moved to the next village. "She is very pretty," Grandma said casually, "and she has a good job, a teacher." Ho smiled tiredly. "Grandma, I am just saying, you are still young, would not want you to be alone forever." He did not answer. He knew she meant well. Everyone in the village meant well. But 3 years was not long enough. He was not sure any amount of time would be long enough. After Grandma Bongsun left, Ho tried to sleep, but sleep did not come easily anymore. He lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, listening to the sounds of the countryside at night. Insects singing, wind moving through the trees, a dog barking somewhere far away. Then he heard something else, a strange sound like thunder but sharper. It came from the direction of his rice field. He sat up. The sound grew louder, closer. There was a bright flash of light outside his window, followed by a tremendous crash that shook the whole house. Ho jumped out of bed and grabbed his flashlight. He ran outside in his sleeping clothes, his heart pounding. Something had fallen from the sky, something big. He ran through the darkness toward his rice field. The crops had been flattened in a wide circle. In the center of the destruction, something was burning. It was not a meteor. It was some kind of machine, a vehicle maybe. It was made of metal that gleamed even through the fire and smoke. Parts of it were broken open, sparking with strange lights. Ho approached carefully. The heat from the fire pushed against his face. He circled the wreckage, looking for any sign of what it might be. Then he saw her. A woman lay in the broken remains of the machine. At least she looked like a woman, but her skin had a pale blue color like the sky before dawn. Her hair was white as snow, and even unconscious and injured, there was something about her that did not look quite human. Ho did not hesitate. He had spent his whole life helping creatures in pain. It did not matter what she was. She was hurt and he could help. He carefully pulled her free from the wreckage. She was lighter than he expected, as if her bones were hollow like a bird's. He lifted her in his arms and carried her back toward his house. Her eyes opened briefly as he walked. They were a strange color, silver with flecks of gold, and they seemed to glow faintly in the darkness. She looked up at him with confusion and fear. "You are safe," he said softly, even though he knew she probably could not understand him. "I am going to help you." Her eyes closed again. She did not wake for 3 days. Ho stayed by her side the entire time. He cleaned her wounds, which were strange and healed differently than human wounds. He monitored her temperature, which was much lower than a human's but seemed to be dropping dangerously. He checked her pulse and discovered that she had 2 heartbeats instead of 1. He did not know what to do with most of this information. He was a veterinarian, not a doctor for alien beings, but he did his best. He kept her warm. He dripped water into her mouth. He talked to her, hoping his voice might be comforting even if his words meant nothing. On the morning of the 3rd day, Grandma Bongsun came by with more food. She nearly dropped her pot when she saw the blue-skinned woman lying in Ho's guest room. "What is that?" she whispered. "I do not know," Ho admitted. "She fell from the sky. I think she is from somewhere very far away." Grandma Bongsun stared at the unconscious woman for a long moment. Then she nodded firmly. "She looks too thin. When she wakes up, we will feed her." That afternoon, the woman finally opened her eyes. She looked around the room with panic at first, trying to sit up. Ho moved to her side and gently pressed her back down. "Careful," he said. "You are still hurt." She stared at him. Her silver eyes were wide with fear and confusion. She spoke something in a language he had never heard before. It sounded like singing mixed with bells. Ho pointed to himself. "Ho," he said slowly, "my name is Ho." She watched his lips move. Then she pointed to herself and said something long and complicated that he could not repeat. He tried anyway. He failed badly. She almost smiled. "Lyra," she said finally, giving him something shorter. Lyra, he repeated, that is a pretty name. She touched her head and winced. There was a wound there covered by a bandage he had made. She looked at it, then looked at him. Something in her expression changed. The fear faded, replaced by something else. Curiosity, maybe, or surprise. Why? She asked. It was the first word she spoke in his language, and her accent was strange, but he understood. Why did you help me? That was what she was asking. Why did you save me? Ho thought about the question. He thought about and how he could not save her. He thought about all the animals he had treated over the years and how some of them died despite his best efforts. He thought about the sadness that had lived inside him for 3 years. Because you needed help, he said simply, and I was there. Lyra stared at him for a long time. In all her years in the palace, surrounded by her own people, no one had ever helped her simply because she needed it. There was always a reason, a political gain, a favor to be repaid later. Kindness without purpose did not exist among the. But this human, this strange creature with his warm brown eyes and his gentle hands, had carried her from a fire and sat beside her bed for 3 days. He had no reason to do it. He had nothing to gain. She did not know what to do with this information, so she simply said, "Thank you." Ho smiled. It was a warm smile, the kind that reached his eyes. "You are welcome, now rest. You need to get stronger." She closed her eyes. For the first time in many years, she did not feel afraid. Outside, the sun was setting again. The rice fields glowed gold beneath the orange sky. And somewhere in the universe, an empire had already forgotten about the princess they had thrown away. They had no idea what they had done. The translator implant in Lyra's head had broken during the crash. This meant she had to learn Korean the old way, one word at a time. It was slow and frustrating, but Ho was patient. He started with picture books meant for children. He would point to an image and say the word: apple, tree, dog, cat, rain, sun. Lyra repeated each word carefully, trying to make her mouth form sounds it was not designed for. Her accent was terrible at first. She made mistakes that turned simple words into nonsense, but she did not give up, and neither did Ho. Weeks passed. Summer turned to autumn. The leaves on the mountains changed from green to red and gold. Lyra grew stronger and her Korean grew better. She started helping around the clinic. At first she just watched Ho work, learning how he examined animals and treated their problems. Then she began handing him tools. Then she started cleaning and organizing. She discovered she liked the work. It felt useful in a way nothing in her life had ever felt before. One afternoon, a farmer brought in an old dog named. The dog was very sick. Ho examined him carefully and then sat back with a sad expression. "I am sorry," he told the farmer. "There is nothing more I can do. He is very old. His body is giving up." The farmer, a large man with rough hands from years of hard work, began to cry. He knelt beside the table and held his dog's face, speaking to him softly. Lyra watched from the corner of the room. She had seen death before, but she had never seen anyone cry over it. Among the death was treated as a failure, something shameful that should be hidden away. No one mourned. No one wept. After the farmer left with his dog, Lyra approached Ho. "He cried," she said. "For an animal, a creature that cannot think or speak. Why?" Ho looked at her. Because he loved. They had been together for 15 years. But the dog was not intelligent, not aware. How can you love something that cannot understand love in return? Ho was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "Love does not need intelligence to exist." That dog gave the farmer companionship, loyalty, joy. Those things matter even if the dog did not know he was giving them. Lyra thought about this for a long time after. Among her people, relationships were transactional. You gave something to receive something. Love was a form of currency, spent only where it would bring returns. The idea of loving something simply because it existed was completely foreign to her. But the more time she spent with humans, the more she saw this strange kind of love everywhere. Grandma Bongsun brought food to neighbors who were sick, expecting nothing in return. Children played with stray cats in the streets, giving them names and treating them like family. Farmers worked from sunrise to sunset to grow food for people they would never meet. Humans were messy and illogical, but there was something beautiful in their chaos. One evening, Lyra was helping Ho organize old photographs. Most of them showed animals he had treated over the years, but one photograph was different. It showed Ho with a young woman, both of them smiling in front of a blooming cherry tree. Lyra held up the picture. "Who is this?" Ho's face changed. The warmth faded, replaced by something heavy and sad. He took the photograph from her hands gently. "Her name was," he said. "She was my wife." "Was?" "She died 3 years ago, cancer." He said the word simply, but Lyra could hear the pain behind it. "I am sorry," Lyra said. "You must have loved her very much." "I did." He looked at the photograph for a long moment. "I am a doctor for animals. I spent my whole life learning how to heal creatures that could not tell me where it hurt. But when got sick, I could not do anything. I could not save her." "That must have been very hard." "It was." He put the photograph down. "For a long time I was angry at the universe, at myself, at everything. I thought, what is the point of being a healer if I cannot heal the person I love most?" Lyra nodded. She understood that kind of anger. She had felt it her whole life. "What changed?" she asked. Ho looked out the window at the darkening sky. "I realized that love is not about fixing things. Sometimes you cannot fix things. Sometimes people you love will suffer and there is nothing you can do about it. Love is about staying, about being there even when it hurts." Lyra felt something shift inside her chest, a strange tightness, like her heart was learning a new rhythm. She had spent her entire life feeling broken, defective, worthless. Her family had treated her like a problem to be solved or a mistake to be hidden. No one had ever simply stayed with her. But Ho had stayed by her bed for 3 days when she was unconscious. He had taught her his language word by word. He had shown her how to care for animals and shared his food and his home without asking for anything in return. He was not trying to fix her, he was just there. "Ho," she said quietly, "thank you for telling me about." He smiled his warm smile. "Thank you for listening." The months continued to pass. Lyra's Korean became fluent. She learned to cook rice, though she burned it the first dozen times. She learned to make kimchi with Grandma Bongsun, who declared her technique acceptable after many weeks of practice. She also started to change in ways she did not fully understand. She laughed more often. She smiled without thinking about it. She woke up each morning feeling something other than dread. One day she realized what it was: hope. She was feeling hope for the first time in her life. The village began to accept her as one of their own. The children called her the pretty blue lady and brought her wildflowers they picked from the hills. The farmers nodded respectfully when she passed, appreciating how hard she worked at the clinic. Even the old women who gossiped by the river had nice things to say about her. No one asked where she came from. No one asked why her skin was blue or her eyes glowed silver. They simply treated her as a neighbor, strange-looking but kind-hearted. Lyra had never belonged anywhere before. She had never had a home that felt like home. But here, in this small village on a forgotten planet, she was starting to feel like she might belong. One night she sat on the porch with Ho, watching the stars. Somewhere out there, far beyond those tiny lights, was the Empire, her father's palace, her brother's cruelty, the life she had left behind. "Do you ever miss your home?" Ho asked. Lyra thought carefully before answering. "I miss the person I thought I could become there, the daughter my father might have loved, the princess who might have mattered." She paused. "But that person never existed. She was only a wish." "And now?" She looked at him, at his kind eyes and his patient smile. at the simple house where she had learned to cook rice and feed chickens, at the clinic where she had discovered the joy of helping creatures in need. "Now I think I am becoming someone real," she said. "Someone who exists not because of what she can give, but just because she is." Ho nodded. He understood exactly what she meant. They sat together in comfortable silence, watching the stars spin slowly overhead. Neither of them knew that Lyra's life was about to change again, in a way that neither of them could have possibly imagined. But for now, in this quiet moment, everything was peaceful, and peaceful was enough. It started with small things. Lyra felt tired more often than usual. Some mornings she woke up feeling sick to her stomach. Foods that she had enjoyed before suddenly made her feel ill. She told herself it was nothing. Perhaps her body was still adjusting to Earth's atmosphere. Perhaps she had caught some human illness. She would feel better soon. But the symptoms did not go away. They got worse. Lyra began to fear the worst. Doctors had warned her since childhood that her genetic defects would shorten her life. They said her body was unstable, that it could begin failing at any time. She had always known she might die young. Now she thought it was finally happening. She hid her symptoms from Ho. She did not want to worry him. More than that, she did not want to become a burden. He had already done so much for her. She could not ask him to watch her die the way he had watched die. So she smiled when she felt sick. She pretended to be strong when she felt weak. She pushed through her work at the clinic even when her body screamed for rest. But Ho was not fooled. He had spent his entire career reading the body language of creatures that could not speak. He knew when a dog was hiding pain. He knew when a cat was sicker than it appeared. And he knew when Lyra was pretending to be fine. One evening, after the last patient had gone home, he sat down across from her in the clinic. His face was serious. "How long have you been feeling sick?" he asked. Lyra looked away. "I do not know what you mean." "Lyra," his voice was gentle but firm. "I can see it. You are tired all the time. You have lost weight. You get dizzy when you stand up too fast. Please do not lie to me." She felt tears prick at her eyes. She had not cried in decades. Among crying was weakness. But here, with this kind human looking at her with such concern, she could not hold it back anymore. "I think I am dying," she whispered. Ho listened as she explained everything. Her genetic defect, her barren status, the warnings from doctors that her body would eventually fail, the shame she had carried her entire life. When she finished, he was quiet for a long moment. Then he shook his head. "No," he said. "No. I do not accept this. I am not going to sit here and watch you give up." He stood up with sudden energy. "There is a doctor in the city, a friend from medical school. Her name is Park 1. She specializes in problems that other doctors cannot solve. We are going to see her." "Ho, this is not a human problem. Human doctors cannot help me." "Maybe not, but I refuse to do nothing. If you are going to die, then at least let us understand why. Let us fight." Lyra stared at him. In her world, when someone was declared defective, everyone simply accepted it. No one fought for the broken ones. They were abandoned and forgotten. But Ho would not abandon her. He would not forget. "Okay," she said quietly, "we can try." The trip to the city took several hours. Lyra wore a hat and long sleeves to hide her unusual skin color. The disguise was not perfect, but it was enough. Dr. Park 1 was a small woman with sharp eyes and quick movements. She listened to Ho's explanation with growing confusion. When he brought Lyra into the examination room and removed her disguise, one's jaw dropped. "You are not human," she said. "No," Lyra admitted. "I am from a planet very far away." One sat down heavily. "I need a moment." She took more than a moment. She asked hundreds of questions. She examined Lyra from head to toe. She took samples of her blood and ran every test she could think of. Several hours later, she called them back into her office. Her face was pale, and her hands were shaking slightly. "I found something," she said, "but you are not going to believe it." She put up an image on her computer screen. It showed something small and round, like a tiny bean. "What is that?" Ho asked. "That," one said slowly, "is an embryo, a developing baby." The room went completely silent. Lyra felt like the floor had disappeared beneath her feet. "That is impossible. I cannot have children. My body cannot produce eggs. The doctors confirmed this when I was born." "I ran the test 6 times, one said. "The result is the same every time. You are pregnant." "But how?" Lyra's voice cracked. "How is this possible?" One leaned forward. "I have been studying your biology all day. You are right that your body does not produce eggs the way human females do. But here is the thing. Human males produce certain hormones, chemicals that exist in very small amounts in most species." She pulled up more data on her screen. "Your species requires extremely specific conditions for reproduction, conditions that males apparently cannot create, but human males can. Their biochemistry produces exactly the right combination of hormones to trigger egg development in females." Lyra's mind was spinning. "You are saying that my infertility was not about me. It was about males." "Exactly. Your body works perfectly fine. It just needed the right conditions. Conditions that only exist with humans." Ho reached over and took Lyra's hand. His fingers were warm and steady. She gripped them tightly, afraid she might collapse without something to hold on to. "I'm going to have a baby," she whispered. "A real baby." "Yes," one said. "A half-human, half-baby, the first of its kind as far as I know." Lyra started to cry. Not sad tears, but tears of shock and joy and overwhelming emotion. Everything she had believed about herself, everything she had been told about her defective body, had been wrong. She was not broken. She had never been broken. She had just been surrounded by the wrong people. The drive home was quiet. Ho kept one hand on the steering wheel and the other on Lyra's knee. Neither of them knew what to say. Finally, as they pulled into the village, Lyra spoke. "Are you scared?" Ho thought about the question. "A little. This is not what I expected from my life, but I am not unhappy about it." He looked at her. "Are you?" Lyra touched her stomach gently. Inside her, something impossible was growing. A child, her child, their child. "I am terrified," she admitted. "But I am also. I do not have a word for it. In my language, there is no word for feeling happy and scared at the same time." Ho smiled. "In Korean, we call it hope." Hope, there was that word again. The feeling Lyra had only recently learned to recognize. "Then yes," she said, "I am feeling hope." They sat together in the parked car, looking at the stars above the village. Somewhere out there, the empire continued on without her. Her father sat on his throne, believing his defective daughter had been properly disposed of. Her brother celebrated his cruelty. None of them knew that the princess they had thrown away was about to do the impossible. None of them knew that everything was about to change. But Lyra knew, and for the first time in her life she was not afraid of the future. She was ready for it. The weeks that followed were the happiest of Lyra's life. She woke each morning knowing that something miraculous was growing inside her. She ate carefully, rested often, and smiled more than she had ever smiled before. Grandma Bongsun noticed the change immediately. "You are glowing," she said one afternoon while they made kimchi together. "Something good has happened to you." Lyra hesitated. She and Ho had agreed to keep the pregnancy secret for now. It was too strange, too impossible. They did not know how people would react. But Grandma Bongsun had a way of seeing through lies. Her old eyes were sharp, and her heart was kind. Lyra found herself telling the truth. The old woman listened without interrupting. When Lyra finished, Grandma Bongsun was quiet for a long moment. Then she reached out and placed her hand on Lyra's stomach. "A miracle," she said softly, "a true miracle. You are not afraid. You do not think I am strange. Child, I have lived for 75 years. I have seen many strange things, but I have never seen anything as beautiful as new life. She smiled warmly. Whatever this baby is, wherever it comes from, it will be loved. That is all that matters. Lyra felt tears in her eyes. Thank you, Grandma. Now eat more. You are too thin. The baby needs nutrition. Life continued in its gentle rhythm. Ho took care of his patients during the day and took care of Lyra in the evenings. Dr. Park visited every few weeks to monitor the pregnancy. She was fascinated by the developing baby, studying every scan with intense curiosity. This child is remarkable, she said during one visit. Its DNA is a perfect blend of both species. No conflicts, no incompatibilities. It is as if humans were designed to fit together. Maybe they were, Ho said. Maybe the universe knows things we do not. But not everyone in the universe wanted this miracle to exist. Far away in orbit around Earth, a small surveillance drone detected something unexpected. A specific frequency that only bodies produced, and not just any signal. This one indicated pregnancy. The drone sent its data back to the nearest outpost. From there, it traveled to a larger station, and from there, it reached the desk of Prince. Read the report 3 times, his anger growing with each word. His worthless sister was alive. Not only alive, but pregnant with a viable heir. This changed everything. Among the children were political power. A new royal child, even one born to the 7th daughter, could shift the balance of succession. Other families would seek alliances. Other princes would lose standing. His position as the favored heir could be threatened. He could not allow this to continue. Called his most trusted commander, a cold-eyed soldier named, "Take a retrieval team to Earth. Bring my sister back, alive if possible, but do not let her escape." And the child asked. "The child is an heir. It belongs to the Empire." His voice was ice. "Bring them both." Bowed and departed. Within hours, a fully armed warship was heading toward Earth. Back in the village, Lyra felt a sudden chill run through her body. She was sitting on the porch, watching Ho work in the garden when the feeling struck her. It was like a shadow passing over the sun, even though the sky was clear. "What is wrong?" Ho asked, seeing her expression. "I do not know. Something feels wrong, like something bad is coming." Ho sat beside her. "Are you feeling sick?" "No, not like that. It is more like," she struggled to find the words, "like someone is watching me, someone who wants to hurt me." Ho frowned. He did not dismiss her fear. He had learned to trust her instincts. "Do you think it is your people, your family?" "Maybe." Lyra touched her stomach. "If the Empire discovered the baby, they would come for us. A royal heir is too valuable to ignore. They would take the child and use it as a political tool. They would take me and use me for breeding. I would never be free again." "Then we will not let them find us." Lyra shook her head. "You do not understand, Ho. They are powerful. They have ships that can cross the galaxy in days. They have soldiers trained since birth for combat. If they come for me, I cannot fight them. No one on this planet can." Ho was quiet for a moment. Then he spoke, and his voice was harder than she had ever heard it. "Then we will have to prove them wrong." "What do you mean?" "You told me that your people think humans are primitive, weak, unimportant. They sent you here because they thought you did not matter and we did not matter." He looked at her with fierce determination. "But you matter to me. This child matters to me, and I will not let anyone take my family away." "Your family?" "Yes." He took her hands in his. "Lyra, I know we have never talked about this properly. I know everything has happened so fast, but I love you. I have loved you since the first week you woke up in my house, and I want to spend the rest of my life with you, however long or short that may be." Lyra felt her hearts pound, both of them beating in perfect rhythm. "Ho. I could not save, I carry that pain with me every day, but I can choose to fight for you, Not to fix the past, but to build a future, our family. Tears streamed down Lyra's face. She leaned forward and pressed her forehead against his. This was the deepest form of intimacy, a sharing of thoughts and souls. "I love you too," she whispered. "I did not know I could feel this way. I did not know such feelings existed, but you taught me. You showed me what love really means." They held each other as the sun set behind the mountains. The sky turned red and gold, and the rice fields glowed with light. A few houses away, Grandma Bongsun stood at her window, watching the strange lights that had begun appearing in the sky at night. They moved too fast to be airplanes and too slow to be shooting stars. She had seen lights like that before, decades ago, during the war. Those lights had meant something bad was coming. She turned away from the window and began preparing. She called the other elders of the village. She spoke to the farmers and the shopkeepers. She told them that their new neighbor might need help soon, that strangers might come looking for her. "What kind of strangers?" they asked. "The kind that should not be allowed to take her," Grandma Bongsun said firmly. The villagers did not ask more questions. They trusted Grandma Bongsun, and they had all grown fond of the pretty blue lady who worked at the veterinary clinic and always smiled so warmly. If strangers came to hurt her, they would find that this small village was not as helpless as it appeared. The stars wheeled overhead, cold and distant. Somewhere among them, a warship was getting closer. The battle for Earth was about to begin. They came at dawn. Lyra woke to the sound of something heavy landing in the field behind Ho's house. She knew that sound. She had heard it all her life in the palace, whenever military ships arrived for inspection. "They are here," she said, shaking Ho awake. He was on his feet in seconds. Through the window, they could see figures emerging from a dark transport craft. They wore the black armor of soldiers, and they moved with the cold precision of trained killers. There were 12 of them. At their head was Commander, his face hidden behind a featureless helmet. "Lyra," Ho said quietly, "get to the back room, stay hidden." "No," she gripped his arm, "I will not let you face them alone. You are pregnant. I am not going to risk you or the baby. And I am not going to lose you, not after everything we have been through." There was no time to argue. The soldiers were already surrounding the house. His amplified voice echoed across the village. "Princess Lyra, by order of Prince, you are to surrender yourself immediately. Resistance will be met with appropriate force." Lyra moved to the door. Ho caught her arm, but she shook her head. "I need to see them. I need to buy us time." She opened the door and stepped onto the porch. The morning sun was just rising, casting long shadows across the ground. Stood 20 meters away, his soldiers spread out in a perfect formation behind him. "Commander," Lyra said. Her voice was calm, even though her hearts were pounding. "I did not expect my brother to send his best dog. Your status has changed, Princess. You are no longer worthless. The Empire requires your return." "I am not going back. This is my home now. These are my people." Tilted his head slightly. "These primitives, these humans," there was disgust in his voice. "They are nothing. They have no technology, no power, no significance. We could destroy this entire village in minutes." "Then why have you not done so already?" Paused. It was a good question. His orders were to retrieve Lyra alive if possible. Destroying everything around her might damage her or the child. But more than that, he had expected this to be easy. A simple extraction from a primitive world. He had not expected resistance. He did not know that resistance was already gathering around him. While Lyra held attention, the villagers had been moving. Grandma Bongsun had organized them through the night, using back paths and hidden signals. Farmers crept through the rice fields with tools that could double as weapons. The local butcher carried knives he had sharpened until they gleamed. Even the children had been given roles, running messages between groups. And Ho had not been idle either. In the weeks since Lyra first told him about her people, he had asked her many questions. What were weaknesses? What technologies did they use? How did their armor work? He had listened carefully to every answer and made plans. Soldiers were strong and fast, but they relied heavily on their technology. Their armor protected them from energy weapons and projectiles, but it was designed for space combat, not ground warfare in wet rice fields. Their helmets filtered toxins from the air, but they could be overwhelmed by certain chemicals. Ho had spent many years as a veterinarian. He knew a lot about chemicals. Grew impatient. Enough of this, soldiers, take her. 4 soldiers moved forward. They expected no real opposition. They expected the humans to run or surrender. They did not expect the ground to explode beneath them. The village farmers had dug pits during the night, covered with thin mats and dirt. The first 2 soldiers fell straight through, crashing into mud and water below. The other 2 stumbled, caught off guard, and in that moment of confusion, Ho struck. He had modified a veterinary dart gun to fire concentrated sedative doses. The tranquilizer was designed for large animals like bulls and horses. He had calculated the dose needed for physiology based on what Lyra had told him. 2 soldiers dropped before they even saw him. "Attack!" shouted. "Kill the humans if you must." The battle exploded into chaos. Farmers swung their tools at soldiers who had never faced close combat with primitives before. They were stronger, but the humans were fighting for their neighbor, their friend, their home. They did not retreat. They did not surrender. Grandma Bongsun led a group of elderly women who threw bags of pepper powder at soldiers' helmets. The powder clogged their air filters and burned their eyes when they removed the helmets to breathe. One soldier was brought down by a 70-year-old woman with a rice paddle. Ho moved through the chaos with his dart gun, picking off soldiers one by one. He had treated injured animals his whole life. He knew where bodies were vulnerable, where nerves clustered, where a strike would cause maximum effect. But they were not helpless. 2 farmers fell to energy blasts. A young man was thrown 20 meters by a soldier's enhanced strength. The village was paying a price for its courage. Lyra watched the battle with growing horror. People were being hurt because of her. Good people who had welcomed her into their community were bleeding and dying. She could not let this continue. She walked down from the porch, past the fighting, straight toward Commander. He had stayed back from the main battle, observing with cold calculation. "Stop this," she said. "Order your soldiers to stand down. Surrender yourself and I will." "No, I will not surrender, but I will give you something better." She stood tall, her silver eyes blazing with determination. "I am Princess Lyra of the 7th House of I formally renounce my title. I renounce my claim to the royal line. I am no longer a member of your empire." Laughed. "You cannot simply renounce your blood. Your child is an heir. It belongs to us. My child is half human, and I hereby claim asylum with the human species." She raised her voice so that everyone could hear. "Any further aggression against this planet is an act of war against a protected sovereign species. The Empire has no jurisdiction here." Jurisdiction stepped closer. "We do not need jurisdiction, we have power. These primitives cannot stop us." "Can they not?" Looked around. Half his soldiers were down. The others were struggling against opponents who fought with desperate fury and strange, unexpected tactics. A rice thresher had been weaponized. Animal traps had crippled 2 more soldiers. The humans were bleeding, but they were not broken. And there was something else. Something in their eyes that had never seen in any species he had conquered. They were not afraid of dying. They were only afraid of losing. "Your ship is monitoring this battle," Lyra said quietly. "They have already transmitted footage back to the Empire. Everyone will see what happened here. The mighty army defeated by farmers with pitchforks." His jaw tightened beneath his helmet. "If you kill me now, you will make me a martyr. The story will spread. Other species will hear how a princess chose humans over her own kind, and the Empire will have to explain why they started a war over one defective daughter they threw away like garbage. For a long moment did not move. His hand rested on his weapon. He could end this in seconds. He could kill Lyra, destroy the village, and eliminate all witnesses. But she was right. The footage was already out there, and Prince had made too many enemies who would love to see him embarrassed. "This is not over," said finally. "The Empire does not forget." "Neither do humans," signaled his remaining soldiers. They gathered their fallen comrades and retreated to their transport ship. Within minutes, they were gone, rising into the sky like a dark dream fading at dawn. Lyra collapsed to her knees. The strength that had held her up drained away all at once. Ho was beside her in an instant. His face was scratched and dirty, but his eyes were full of relief. "You did it. You actually did it." "We did it," she whispered, "all of us." Around them, the villagers were helping each other up. The injured were being carried to the clinic. Grandma Bong's son was already organizing food and bandages. They had won. Against impossible odds, against superior technology, against an empire that spanned the stars, a small village in the Korean countryside had won. Lyra looked up at the sky where the ship had disappeared. She knew her brother would not give up easily. She knew there would be more challenges ahead. But for now, for this moment, they were safe. And she knew that whatever came next, she would not face it alone. 2 years passed. The village healed. The damaged buildings were repaired. The rice fields were replanted. The farmers who had fought in the battle became local legends, telling there about the night they defeated soldiers from the stars. And in Ho's house, there was laughter again. Hana was born on a spring morning when the cherry blossoms were in full bloom. She was small and perfect, with her mother's silver eyes and her father's warm smile. Her skin was pale lavender, a beautiful blend of both species. Ho held his daughter for the first time and wept. He had thought his chance at a family had died with. He had thought his future held only quiet loneliness. But life had surprised him in the most wonderful way. "She is beautiful," he whispered. "She is ours," Lyra replied, exhausted but happy. "Our impossible miracle." Hana grew quickly, as children did. By her first birthday, she was already walking. By 18 months, she was speaking in both Korean and the few words Lyra had taught her. She had her mother's curiosity and her father's gentle heart. The villagers adored her. Grandma Bong's son spoiled her with homemade treats. The farmers let her help feed the animals. The children played with her in the streets, fascinated by her unusual appearance but accepting her completely. Life was good, life was peaceful. But the universe had not forgotten about the princess who had an empire. News of the failed retrieval spread through space like fire. Prince tried to suppress it, but the story was too remarkable to contain. A worthless princess, exiled to a primitive world, had somehow become pregnant. She had fought back against soldiers. She had won. Other species heard the story and began to whisper. If humans could defeat, perhaps the empire was not as powerful as they claimed. Perhaps there was hope for rebellion. Perhaps resistance was possible. Emperor watched these developments from his throne with growing concern. His son's petty revenge had become a political disaster. The empire was facing questions it had never had to answer before. He summoned his advisors and demanded information about Earth, about humans, about the daughter he had ignored for decades. What he learned disturbed him. Humans were not the primitive animals the empire had dismissed. They were creative and adaptable. They had built civilizations from nothing. They had split the atom and walked on their own moon. And they had something else, something they had never understood. They loved without reason. They fought for strangers. They died for ideas. The emperor was old. He had ruled for 500 years and he was tired. He had sacrificed everything for power, for legacy, for the continuation of his bloodline. He had thrown away his own daughter because she could not give him what he wanted. And now she had given him something he never expected, a reason to doubt everything he believed. One day, a single ship appeared in Earth's orbit. It was unarmed, carrying no soldiers, displaying the flags of diplomatic immunity. Lyra received the message while Hana napped in the next room. It was a formal invitation from Emperor himself. Princess Lyra was requested to present herself and her child to the imperial court, not as a prisoner, as a dignitary. "What does it mean?" Ho asked, reading over her shoulder. "I do not know," Lyra admitted. "It could be a trap. My father has never shown interest in me before. Why would he start now? Maybe he changed." "Do not change." But even as she said it, she knew it was not entirely true. She had changed. Her understanding of love, of family, of what mattered in life had transformed completely. If she could change, perhaps others could too. She debated for many days. Ho supported whatever decision she made. "You do not owe them anything," he said. "They threw you away. They do not deserve your presence." "I know." Lyra looked at Hana, who was playing with blocks on the floor. "But maybe this is not about what they deserve. Maybe it is about showing the galaxy who we are, who I have become." In the end, she decided to go, but she did not go alone. Ho came, of course, and Dr. Park One, who refused to miss the chance to study medicine firsthand, and Grandma Bong's son, who declared that someone needed to make sure Lyra was eating properly. "You are not seriously bringing a 77-year-old woman to an alien planet," Ho said. "Try and stop me," Grandma Bong's son replied. The journey to Prime took several weeks. Hana loved the ship, running through its corridors and pressing her face against the windows to watch the stars. She asked 1,000 questions about everything she saw. When they finally arrived at the Imperial Palace, Lyra felt memories flooding back. The towering spires, the floating platforms, the cold, perfect beauty of everything. She had grown up here, but it had never felt like home. She held Ho's hand as they walked through the great hall. Thousands of watched from their platforms, whispering behind their hands. The worthless princess had returned, and she had brought aliens with her. Prince stood near the throne, his face twisted with barely contained rage. He had expected Lyra to refuse the invitation. He had expected her to hide on her primitive planet forever. Instead, she walked into his domain with her head held high. Emperor descended from his throne. He was ancient, his face lined with centuries of decisions and regrets. He walked slowly toward Lyra and stopped a few feet away. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. Then Hana, who had been hiding behind her mother's legs, stepped forward. She looked up at the tall old man with curious silver eyes. "Are you my grandfather?" she asked in perfect Korean. The emperor looked down at the small lavender child. She had his daughter's eyes. She had the features of an alien species he had dismissed as worthless, and she looked at him without fear or hatred, with the simple openness of a child who had been raised with love. Something broke inside. Some wall that had stood for centuries crumbled. "Yes," he said quietly, "I suppose I am." Hana smiled. "Grandmother Bongsun says grandfathers give good hugs, do you?" The entire hall fell silent. No one had ever spoken to the emperor with such casual disrespect. No one had ever dared. But the emperor slowly knelt down, bringing himself to the child's level. And for the first time in anyone's memory, he smiled. "I have not hugged anyone in a very long time," he admitted, "but I would like to try." Hana threw her arms around his neck. The emperor held her carefully, as if she might break, and closed his eyes. Lyra watched with tears streaming down her face. Beside her, Ho squeezed her hand. "They sent you as a joke," said finally, looking up at his daughter, "and you returned as proof that we understood nothing." Lyra stepped forward. "I returned as myself, father, that is enough." The emperor nodded slowly. "Yes, yes, I believe it is." The days that followed were strange and difficult. There were negotiations and treaties. There were scientists who wanted to study Hana and politicians who wanted to use her. But Lyra handled them all with the quiet strength she had learned from her years on Earth. When it was time to leave, Emperor came to see them off. He was different now, softer somehow. The cold pride that had defined him was cracking, letting something warmer shine through. "Will you return?" he asked Lyra. "Perhaps, if you promise to visit us on Earth." "Me, visit a primitive planet?" Lyra smiled. "You might learn something. The humans taught me that love does not need to be earned, that family can be chosen, that even the most broken person can find healing." Looked at Ho, at Grandma Bongsun, at Dr. Park, at the strange collection of humans who had welcomed his discarded daughter into their hearts. "Perhaps I will," he said quietly. The ship carried them home, back to the small village in the mountains, back to the clinic where animals waited to be healed, back to the rice fields that glowed gold at sunset. Lyra stood on the porch with Ho, watching Hana chase chickens around the yard. Grandma Bongsun was in the kitchen, cooking dinner. Dr. Park was examining the latest scans of Hana's development, marveling at the perfect blend of two species. "Are you happy?" Ho asked. Lyra considered the question. She thought about the palace she had left behind, the cold family that had rejected her, the empire that had thrown her away like garbage. Then she looked at the life she had built, the husband who loved her without conditions, the daughter who filled her days with laughter, the community that had fought for her and welcomed her as one of their own. "Yes," she said, "I am happy." Ho pulled her close. "Then that is enough." The sun set behind the mountains, painting the sky in shades of orange and gold. The stars came out one by one, stretching across the darkness like scattered diamonds. Somewhere out there, the empire was changing. Species that had been dismissed as primitive were being reconsidered. Ideas about love and family and worthiness were being questioned. All because one defective princess had been sent to a forgotten planet as a joke. And she had come back with a baby, a family, and proof that the greatest power in the universe was not technology or strength. It was love. The story ended where it began, with a princess who had been told she was worthless, but now she knew the truth. Her worth had never depended on what she could produce or what she could give. Her worth came from who she was, and who she was finally enough.